Looking at the divisional round playoff schedule, does the NFL have a parity problem on their hands with the haves and the have-nots? And looking back at the Rams-Lions, was it a win-win trade in the NFL? All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson mailbag.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making this your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate all the everydayers out there that are hanging out with us as we go through the postseason, offseason, NFL draft season, and a whole lot more every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. If you're new, welcome to the show. Hit the like button. Let us know you came through, and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. Seriously, right now, pause and hit subscribe. We appreciate it.
Do it.
Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. First question is, this ties into a lot of ideas for me and a lot of things that are bouncing around in my head. And it pertains to both not only the playoffs, but the offseason and the draft as well. And the NFL has been a league since they implemented the hard salary cap, really since the era of the mid-90s when we saw, it was the NFC then, right? It was the Cowboys and the Packers and the 49ers, and whoever won the NFC championship game was going to win the Super Bowl. And there were teams that were bad for decades, and there were teams that were good for seemingly decades, and very few in between. And the NFL, I think has done a great job at building parity in their league. But this season, it's started to skew more and more. And in recent years, it has. But this year, it just stands out to me more than ever how the lack of parity versus recent history that there is in the NFL. And a question here from Michael: does the AFC specifically have a parity problem? The same 4 AFC divisional teams this year from last, same divisional winners, if I'm not mistaken, in the AFC. And will that even change in 2025? And I'm with Michael on this. I don't know if it's a problem necessarily. It's a problem for the teams that don't have Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and, CJ Stroud is the 4th quarterback in the AFC. And CJ Stroud might be the top quarterback drafted versus all the NFC quarterbacks in the NFL as well. And so what we've seen with the dynasty that the Kansas City Chiefs are building, Matt, I think the NFL somewhat does have a parity problem. And it makes me wonder if if the quarterback position is so important that if you don't have one of those top 4 or 5 guys, that you should just keep trying to get one of the top 4 or 5 guys, and almost nothing else matters. Is everyone else just playing for the middle?
I lean towards yes. Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's kind of like baseball. That I remember when Albert Bell and Jim Tomei or whatever, they all hit at the same time for the Indians, and then they were good. But they were a small market team. They drafted them all the same time. They all got good at the same time, and then they left. I still think you can do that. Boy, the stars align and everybody's good at the same time, and you don't have a quarterback, and you can knock off Mahomes, blah, blah, blah. Mahomes has only lost to 2 guys, though, in the postseason, and that's Burrow and Brady. I mean, other, Hall of Fame superstar, we can talk all day about this, but I'm not blaming the NFL. There's no way around it, but I think quarterbacks are too important. I mean, I really do. And it really hits home. And this example could go for so many teams, but that's why I bring up the Steelers stuff a lot. You can't imagine how many times I've been asked the last couple of days, well, what can the Steelers do to compete with the top teams in the AFC? They always get in the playoffs and they get knocked off. I'm like, well, they lost in Baltimore. The year before that, they lost in Buffalo. The year before that, they lost in Kansas City and got blown out all 3 times. I'm like, well, find your Lamar, Allen, or Mahomes, and you'll be fine. But they don't. There's those three and Burrow to me. I think there's four superheroes on the planet. And I would probably much rather have the Steelers roster than the Bengals, especially defensively. But if you give me Burrow and nothing else, I at least think they have a chance to get back to against the Chiefs because they got the piece you can't find. Maybe Herbert's that guy, maybe Stroud's that guy, maybe Caleb Williams is that guy, or Drake May, or whatever. But as it stands now, I think it's really telling that there's two things that really stood out to me with these guys is the year Kansas City traded Tyreek in the offseason was supposed to be their rebuild.
Right.
And they won the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
This past year, we looked at the Bills. They're moving some pieces. They're cutting cap space. They trade Diggs. They're better than ever because Allen's better than ever. You know what I mean? It's knocking those guys off, especially in the AFC. I mean, again, the Steelers would have had to beat Lamar and then beat Allen and then beat Mahomes to get to the Super Bowl. Russell Wilson could play his A+ game, and that's still never going to happen.
Right. I totally agree. And it's the top three guys are all in the AFC. The fourth guy might be in the AFC. And one of the everyone was talking about how bad Darnold was. Darnold turned into a pumpkin. I looked at it the other way and I saw, man, Matthew Stafford
is awesome.
Best quarterback in the NFC side of the tournament. And guess what? He's got a really good head coach. He might have the best head coach in the NFC side of the tournament. And then they built themselves a little bit of a defensive line. Put money on the
good enough. Right.
Yeah.
Good enough.
Yeah.
They could win the whole thing now. If he's that good, what do you do about it? And I guess this isn't uncommon. I mean, I want Jordan in the playoffs. I want LeBron in the playoffs. The guy that touches the ball the most is the best players. And even established coaches will tell you it's Jimmy's and Joe's more than X's and O's in the playoffs, that those things become more and more pronounced, So this isn't uncommon in sports, especially basketball, football, where you can determine who's going to have the ball all the time. Hockey, Gretzky wins a ton of cups and Lemieux, et cetera, et cetera. But it's really frustrating. I mean, the Steelers are just happen to be the perfect example, of you can do everything right, which they don't. But you can do everything right and maybe knock one of those three guys off, but not all three.
Yeah, and you have to really build an awesome team around your quarterback. You have to get lucky. You need someone to catch the ball off their helmet.
That kind of stuff. Right.
Mentioned on yesterday's program, the 2007 Giants. Steve Spagnuolo was their defensive coordinator, and they had the NASCAR package of defensive linemen. And Eli was good, but he's not amazing. And why did they knock off the Patriots? Well, they affected Tom Brady enough. They got lucky, guys catching the ball off their helmet. I've had this conversation a lot on Locked On 49ers. The next question's about Brock Purdy. And the 49ers had great injury luck last year. You build an awesome team, the best roster in the NFL around your quarterback. You get through the NFC side of the playoffs, and you still lose to Mahomes, who's supposed to be on a down year for the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. How do you get better than the 2023 San Francisco 49ers, aside from having a superstar quarterback? And so it does start to feel like, man, and
it's kind of hopeless.
Yeah, and even for a team that has a superstar quarterback, and Josh Allen has been phenomenal in the playoffs, and he's still lost to Burrow or Patrick Mahomes. He
might lose to Lamar this week.
Yeah,
we're going to talk. And we're talking about how about MVP anymore? Like, what a bum Allen is. He can't win anything.
Right, and then if he wins that, he's got to go against Mahomes and the Chiefs again, probably.
Right.
And so an NFC team that gets to the Super Bowl is going to have to go against someone who's that battle tested, and a team that's gone through that. And they're going to look at the Lions and be like, well, we can take down an injured defense with the Lions and Jared Goff. We just went through Mahomes and Lamar Jackson in those football teams,
right. Imagine game planning for those guys week after week in the playoffs.
In 2021, Josh Allen had a 9-0 touchdown to interception ratio in 2 games. And got beat.
Yeah. Right. And up until recently, that Lamar Jackson, he can't win in the playoffs. Come on. I mean, he's just turned 27. He might win his 3rd MVP award, and now he's running through people in the playoffs too. And I'm sure if they lose in Buffalo, we're going to hear about that. Yeah, I don't know if Lamar's good enough. What are you talking about? A couple other 2 little things I want to mention along this line. Again, we could do a whole half hour on this, and maybe we will in July or whatever. But I can't, last we saw Vrabel with the Titans at their best, when Henry's running through people, Arthur Smith's the coordinator, Tannehill's the quarterback. They ended up with the 1 seed in the AFC, playing great defense, running the football, but they still stood no chance. Even if you're even if you get the bye and you can eliminate one of those obstacles because you're resting that week, it's still almost impossible to knock off 2 of those dudes, because you're going to run into at least 1, probably 2. If the Steelers build the best running game and best defense in the league and don't turn the ball over and play old school football, they might win a playoff game, but are they going to win 3 or 4? Probably not. And the last team I can remember, and maybe I'm missing one, coincidentally had a Hall of Fame quarterback, Peyton Manning, but he was not a Hall of Fame quarterback with the Broncos. They played defense and ran the ball, and above the neck he still was, but he was not a superhero anymore. And I don't know if you can win that anymore.
Right. And even then, if you don't have one of those guys, you still need you need a magical Nick Foles run.
Right.
And you have to have a great offensive line and defense and team around you on top of it. And you need a lot of luck. The margin for error is just so much more slim if you don't have one of those guys. And the question
you can't trade Tyreek Hill and be like, Russell Wilson will elevate these guys.
Yeah.
Right.
The question is it a parity problem? I don't know if it's a problem. It's a problem if you want parity, because parity is going away a little bit. And even in the regular season this year, we saw so many these teams are all bad and these few teams are really good. And there's not as much in the middle before. And I think that's where the problem, because I think the NFL wants stars and they don't mind the same people going and winning championships and having dynasties and things like that.
Right.
But they want more competitive teams late in the season. And I think this year, more than ever in recent history, we didn't have that. So that might be the problem of it.
And I do think Burrow's at that level with those other 3 in the AFC. He just is in the worst organization in the group and doesn't have as much around him. But I bet you and I are going to pick the Chiefs, Bills, and Ravens to go to the playoffs next year.
Yeah.
I know I am already. I don't care what they do this offseason.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Next, let's talk. We got questions about Brock Purdy. How much is he going to get paid? I've talked a lot about this. I think I can keep it short. By the way, 49ers, only team that went from first to worst in the NFL last year.
Ouch.
They did not have one of those quarterbacks. But is Brock Purdy going to get paid like one of those quarterbacks? And does Myles Garrett want out of Cleveland? Next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 extra to play with in bonus bets on FanDuel. Win or lose on that first $5 bet, you're going to get that extra $200. And the FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets on the NFL, same game parlays that are super fun. Of course, all the weekly lines, all of the prop bets, a ton of Super Bowl prop bets, NFL draft prop bets, which I love. And of course, NFL or NHL, NBA, every sport imaginable. You're going to find that action on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL. On the topic of Brock Purdy, and I think this really ties in with what we were talking about with the parity in the NFL. And Michael asks, are the 49ers really going to pay Brock Purdy $50+ million per year? Short answer is, I think yes. I think it's going to be an interesting negotiation, because I think in reality, John Lynch is going to say, hey, you want to sign for around 45, which is a lot of money. And Brock Purdy's agent is going to be like, no, we want Dak money. We want 60. So it's hard to close the gap on $15 million per year. It's going to be an interesting structure. We'll see how that all works out. But Brock Purdy, if I had to guess, is going to get more than $50 million per year. AAV, at least what the first number that the agent puts out there. We'll see what the structure is like for Brock Purdy. Structure will be really important with this deal if they do a deal over $50 million per year. And who knows, it might be shockingly high. He might get Dak money. I don't know. He's going to get paid a lot because teams are just afraid to look behind door number 2 at quarterback. My argument is, because of the conversation we just had, Matt, the teams should be less afraid of peeking behind door number 2.
Yeah, me too. And this would make your crew nuts, but the Lance move is the right move.
So the execution of the Lance move was horrible. The idea of trying to raise your ceiling at quarterback is absolutely a great move.
Right. No matter the cost.
Right. it was such the Lance offseason was so strange. They didn't even know who their quarterback was going to be. It was like this idea of, but we want to stay cheap at quarterback. We want to get better at quarterback. Their process, it was the COVID offseason, so the process was weird with drafting quarterbacks. Lance didn't even play before. There's a lot of reasons it was a bad pick and a bad process of getting to him, but the overall idea was not a bad one. And I used this.
We can't get there with Jimmy. We just had this conversation about the Steelers. You know, I mean,
right, yeah.
I need a superhero.
Mm-hmm. And so I just laid out how the 49ers had a super team, and Brock Purdy's really good, by the way. He should get $40 million per year.
Yeah, he's worth every penny.
To me, it's asinine that Brock Purdy's making $900,000, right? And going to a Super Bowl. And it's also, I think, asinine to think that he should be paid the same as Mahomes and Allen and Lamar Jackson, because now you're instantly behind, because he is not those guys. As much as you can like Brock Purdy and know that he's not in that category.
Sure.
So now you're
a couple that are right.
Now you're instantly behind. And I will point to the 49ers games against those teams. 49ers, super team, great injury luck, can't build it better, and they still lose to Mahomes in the Super Bowl. And guess what? The last few seasons when they've played the Bills, the Ravens, they've gotten destroyed by those teams. They've looked like a second division team against those teams.
You can't out scheme them because they got a superhero, right? Yeah.
And in fact, during that 2020 season, the Niners were really broken and injured, similar to how they were this year with Jimmy G. It was still the Jimmy G 49ers in 2020. They got beat up by Josh Allen late in the season and the Bills. And I think Kyle Shanahan said, man, you know what? I'd really like to have one of those. And I think that's what led to them going and getting Trey Lance. He was hoping to get that. They didn't get it.
They took a swing.
Right. Ended up finding a quarterback they really like in Brock Purdy. But a $900,000 Brock Purdy and a $50 million Brock Purdy is a very different proposition. And it's going to be tougher to build that super team to get you back. And, you need luck and you need to be great everywhere. It could be a deal that, the Niners kind of, they're not going to, I don't think they lock themselves into mediocrity. But again, I would say
the stars have to align.
I would not be as afraid to peek behind door number 2.
I hear you. I think that's it. Boy, this is a much longer conversation. There's 32 different owners out there, and they have 32 different degrees of wanting to win the Super Bowl. Let's put it that way. That some are very happy with the Steelers getting, I'm not saying Mr. Rooney is. I'm just saying a lot of owners would take that all day long. Okay, maybe we win one every 20 years when Ben happens to hit. But if we can have a winning team every week and fill the stadium, great. Where maybe the Eagles are like, that's not good enough. Hurts isn't good enough. We'll move on from him. Wentz isn't good enough. We're going to move on from him. Whoever it is. So I do think, that Purdy's worth it. And maybe they can put a super team together with Warner and Trent Williams and do it again and run it back. And maybe you get a good bounce in the Super Bowl and you get it, but you probably don't win 3 and 4 years. You almost certainly don't. Right. There's no chance of being a dynasty. Maybe you get to your year. And here's the other thing I think really interesting. What if Lamar, Allen, Burrow, Mahomes, or the next guy is a real jagoff and just says, I want $100 million. He's worth it.
Well, he would get it. You would just have to play out you'd have to do the Kirk Cousins, play out your deal, get tagged twice, and then hit free agency, and then actually have teams bidding on you. So, and that's sort of one of the things that's happening right now, because people talk about market value. 100% of the top quarterback contracts, all of them, none of those quarterbacks hit the market.
Right.
The teams were either afraid to look behind the curtain or just, re-up their own guy. And so I would argue that, when Brock Purdy gets paid $55 million or whatever, he'll be right in that group of some of the top paid quarterbacks in the NFL. In reality, those aren't market. People talk about that's market value. Those are none of those. None of those contracts are market value, because
they never went to market.
And Allen went to market. They would get twice as much as they're already getting.
I think what Kirk Cousins got last year. He's like the last good one that went to market.
Right. And he's still got 45. So I think or 40 years.
Allen would get double that.
Right. Exactly. But and I think guys like Tua and Purdy and some of the others would get below what this quote unquote market value is. So it would actually be even skewed even more. So when people bring up market value as it pertains to Brock Purdy, just because that's what some other guys got, my argument is that is absolutely not market value. These are teams that are afraid.
It's not the definition of market value.
Teams that are afraid to look behind door number 2, and they just get held hostage by the guy that they have. And again, I don't think it's wrong or bad to be just solid. And I think that's what these teams are going to be. And that's what the 49ers are probably going to be for a long time, is solid with Brock Purdy. Mm-hmm. But if the goal is we're going to go try to build this dynasty, win multiple Super Bowls,
there's only one way to do it.
It's harder to. It's certainly hard to do if you don't have one of those top guys, and it's even harder to do if you're paying a not top guy like a top guy.
And that even makes Mahomes that much more impressive. Like, what if he wins it this year, and the 2 MVPs are also in your conference? Like, the fact that he's heads above Allen and Lamar and Burrow in terms of accomplishments right now is insanity.
Right. It's insanity.
I mean, if he was in the NFC, you'd be like, I kind of get it, How
about a look back at the Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff, Rams, Lions trade? How good are both these teams feeling about how that trade has gone for their franchises? And does Myles Garrett want out of Cleveland next? Today's episode of Peacock Williamson brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happens. And I was shocked looking at Rocket Money and see how many subscriptions you actually end up paying for. And then you put the spouts through it. And then you're like, well, wait a second. I didn't even know you had that one that you were paying for. And you start to realize how much money you're spending on subscriptions monthly. It feels like every company out there has some kind of subscription plan now. It's the only way to buy things is via subscription now. So get in control of your subscriptions with Rocket Money. It's a personal finance app that helps you not only find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, but monitors your spending, helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions alone, saving members up to $740 a year when using the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Man, it's rare that a trade goes so well for multiple teams. And obviously the Rams won a Super Bowl with Stafford, but they're back in it now with Stafford into the divisional round of the playoffs. Joey Bagadonis, frequent listener of the program, says, is the Rams-Lions trade the best example of both teams winning the trade?
I think the answer is yes. It always bothers me when a big trade happens. Hey, Matt, who won the trade? Well, they both think they did because they're in different places. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, let's not forget what Stafford's perception was when he got traded. Terrible organization, hurt a lot. They're never going anywhere. Was good back with Calvin Johnson and is a really good player. And the X's and O's are great, but doesn't have much around him. Gets the crap beat out of him. Yeah, right. So I went back and looked what exactly the deal was. The Rams only got Stafford. Didn't even get like a 3rd-round pick mixed in at all. And at the time, and I believe this to be true, but nobody would ever admit it. And remember, the GM of the Lions came from the Rams, so he knew Goff really well. But the only way the trade works is if they take Goff. You can't go with Goff and Stafford at their costs. So I think that Goff didn't even factor in. I think he was like, you have to take him. It's not like the Deshaun Watson or Osweiler deal, but he didn't carry a lot of weight in the trade.
Yeah, he was a throw-in as a stopgap to whatever the Lions were going to do. They wanted the draft picks, and they're building a new thing. But they liked Goff enough to be that, and he was part of the deal where you got to
take a chance on him again, right?
Right. And Goff had just been in a Super Bowl, and it looked like he didn't belong there against a better team and a better foe.
And McVay, much like your Niners, looked at him like he's our Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm going to go get my Trey Lance. I'm going to go get my superhero. And he did, and they won, and that's amazing.
By the way, same offseason, Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay were both in Cabo when the trade happened.
Yeah. That's so cool. Yeah.
And Kyle Shanahan was like, what the hell? What's going on? I just started my vacation in the offseason. I kind of would have done that trade. And I think that was partially a catalyst to also what the Niners did a little bit later, making the trade
gotta react to
with
it.
their guy. Yeah, because I think they were looking at the draft and might have potentially done the same trade for Matthew Stafford. So McVay a little quicker on the trigger than Kyle Shanahan, and it might have added to the urgency for the 49ers to make a big move, and they gave up a lot to go up in the draft and end up with Trey Lance.
Pretty crazy. So again, I don't think Goff really factors in the compensation, but the picks at the time were a first and 22, a first and 23, a second and 22, a second and 23, a third and 23, and a third and 21. You know what I mean? Like, that's serious compensation. 2 firsts, 2 seconds, 2 thirds. And they didn't hit on all the picks, but they end up getting Jamison Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Sam Laporta with those exact picks, you know? So it's absolutely a win for both teams. And one of the things I give the Lions most credit for is they not developed them, but they stuck with Goff and made that work. You know, they didn't have to go fish on the quarterbacks. Now we'll come back to the same decision. Maybe they roll through the NFC and then they meet Mahomes and they get killed. And then they go, oh man, now I need to go get Trey Lance. You know what I mean? Like, we could rinse, repeat. We just had this conversation.
Phenomenal trade, and really from the Lions side of things, how well it's gone. They've done a great job of building the thing around Jared Goff, and Jared Goff is playing his best ball. So he's continued to get better as well. And so really phenomenal how this has worked out for both sides, and seeing now where the Rams are. And by the way, Matthew Stafford, we've talked a lot about the haves and have nots at quarterback, and there's an elite group, a small elite group of quarterbacks. Should we still put Stafford right now today? I'm not talking about your 2028. I'm talking about right now today. Is Stafford still like 5?
I think he's 1 in the NFC.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I mean, he's the last one I want to play against. Right. When he's hot, forget about it.
Yes.
Boy, was he hot this week, you know?
Yep, absolutely.
And you mix him with McVay, and, you know, that's a whole nother conversation. You know, that's a great quarterback coach combination.
And when you have the quarterback coach combination, I preach it all the time. When you have that, all you need is just like a little pass rush and you're good. You're winning games.
Yeah. Get open, Puka. I'll get you the ball. You know? Exactly. Or kind of get open and I'll get you the ball, you know? Scheme it up, you know?
Is the Myles Garrett era over for the Cleveland Browns? Their best player? I mean, I imagine a lot of teams would be interested if he was potentially on the market, Matt.
I think he's the best defensive player on the planet, and I always joke that when I say that in Pittsburgh, I'm afraid to start my car because, you know, oh, he's overrated, yeah, blah, blah. He's unbelievably good. I think there's a chance that this is the story of the offseason, you know, that who's going to trade for Myles Garrett, because the Browns are in a bad spot, and basically on his exit interview, he didn't say I won out, but his tone and the way he said, most important thing to me is winning, and didn't exactly jump up and down like we're knocking on the door of winning here. And then Hard Knocks aired Tuesday night, and since then I've been hearing it more and more because more people actually saw the interview because they replayed it. I don't know if he'll move or not, but considering their Watson dilemma, it might be the only choice. And maybe if I'm him and maybe some others, you start to kind of press the team and say, I'm requesting a trade, and you'd get a ton for him.
You would have to attach Watson to a Garrett trade, wouldn't you? Find a team with huge cap space that's willing to eat the Watson money and still give you something probably considerable to make it make sense from the Cleveland Browns perspective, because he could say, I want out.
The latest Watson injury, though, might get the Browns off the hook a little bit in terms of, because he re-injured his Achilles, you know, while rehabbing or whatever, not on the field. They might be able to dance around this and get some of that money revoked or whatever.
Hide him on some sort of a list.
Yeah,
it's not like
I don't understand it very well.
It's one thing to take up cap space, but if he's just not really around, it's probably like, okay, well, he's gone. Let's build it around a different quarterback.
Like they have a second pick of the draft, they'll probably take one, right? You know,
right. Yeah, he's not playing next year for him. He'll probably never play again for him, to be honest.
I don't think he plays again. Maybe he doesn't even go in the facility again. I don't, you know.
There's like the right post June 1st maneuver, then they cut him, and, you know, ate up a lot of cap. Bad move, cost him a lot, but in the end, he's not really around.
I mean, even the Watson situation aside, they're not close to being a winner. I mean, Garrett just being like, trade me to a contender. I mean,
Right.
the Chiefs would give you 3 first-round picks for him, wouldn't you?
And if you're Myles Garrett, you're not like, oh, cool, we drafted Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders.
No, that's not exciting.
Right.
Yeah, that doesn't help my problem. I'm only in this league 5 more years, and then you're giving me no chance to win.
Yeah, and for the Browns, they probably don't want to mute any of the return they would get, because that would be the big thing, is they're getting multiple first-round picks for Myles Garrett.
And they hope they can do what the Lions did and hit on Jahmyr Gibbs and Laporta, and right.
Mm-hmm.
We just need as many picks we possibly can to start over.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, it's probably the smartest route.
It might not be bad. Yeah,
but then you're also, if you're the coaching staff, you're like, well, hold on a second, we're about to get fired if that's the case. So,
of course, right.
But it would have had to be a whole total reset. So Myles Garrett would probably have to really force his way out on this one. Otherwise, nobody in the building, except for, I don't think anybody in the building would want to allow that to happen. In the current state of, we're still have the same.
I think he has to force his way out.
Coaches, yeah.
But he seems like a really smart dude that has to look at, we got Lamar and Burrow in this damn division, and the Steelers, for whatever reason, always go to the playoffs too. Like we're a distant fourth.
Yeah. Yeah, of those quarterbacks we talk about, 2 of them are in your division.
They're in the damn division, right? Trust me, I know.
Well, that's what they try. And again, can you fault them? They tried to do it with Deshaun Watson. That's kind of
right. They rolled the dice too. Right.
Now, that was an obviously weird.
There's off the field stuff.
If that would have happened 1 calendar year earlier, it would have been like, oh man, Browns, good job. They went and got it differently. By the way, another wrinkle in that crazy 2021 offseason, there was the Stafford trade. There was the Niners trading up for Trey Lance. It was the Trevor Lawrence draft. The Deshaun Watson stuff came out in January. And
yes, I mean, like this time of year.
Yeah, and he was already on the trade block. And if that stuff didn't come out, I think the 49ers were in on him more than Stafford. Deshaun Watson might have been the 49ers quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Like, what if that comes out 2 months later or whatever, after you traded for him?
Right. Or whatever other teams were in on Watson at that time were really lucky that the story came out in January and not in March.
Absolutely. Yeah. But what's crazy, everyone thought Deshaun was the best guy and the Texans were the worst organization ever. He had nothing to do with those guys.
Yes.
That wasn't misleading either. The Texans were a disaster.
They were a disaster.
Right.
And Watson was one of these guys we're talking about. He was a top 5 quarterback.
Exactly. He's knocking on the door. He's the Herbert or one of those type of Stroud or, right.
I think we looked at him collectively even higher than we look at Herbert.
I think so too. Yeah. And there was a point where he was a top 3 or 4 guy. Yeah.
Unbelievable. The arc of Deshaun Watson.
There's going to be a movie.
Yeah. I think there's a lot more that we're going to learn about all of that too, as well, in the coming years, but probably not on the field, maybe ever again. I
don't think ever again.
Thanks everybody for your questions. Apologies to the great questions we would not get to as you're watching football this weekend. If you want to get some early questions in for the Peacock and Williamson mailbag, hit us at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL in the YouTube comments. Subscribe while you're there. Matt and I back tomorrow making picks for divisional playoffs right here, Peacock and Williamson.